This is the FitnessFest Podcast detailing the story of fitness professionals from around the world. Let's get to the episode. Welcome to the FitnessFest Podcast. My name is Tyler Valencia. I'm the president of KIPS and Kettlebell Concepts. Today, we have a great educator and a great story to share with you all. I have the senior fitness director for education of Youfit, Raphael Konforti. He's going to share his journey and also share a little bit of insight into how he got to that. So Raph, thank you for coming on the episode. And to kick things off, can you kind of share your story within fitness and get a little background on how you got to where you are, even before Youfit?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on, Tyler. My journey in fitness was not exactly the straight line that you might imagine looking from the outside in. I was not the natural born athlete who just found his way into fitness. I was actually quite the opposite, dialing it back all the way to elementary school. I had parents who were kind of hippies, very into the natural food. They were eating, wheat germ and seaweed and kelp and all these things that now we're eating, 30 years later. Mm-hmm. So, and long story short, like a lot of people, I think in my generation, the parents got divorced, and that led to me sort of unconsciously going from living a pretty healthy, active lifestyle to all of a sudden eating all sorts of terrible junk food. If you can imagine all those sugary cereals, the Totino's pizzas that you pop in the oven when you get home. I was just eating terrible food and having no, conscious idea of really what I was eating. I was just eating. And that led to me gaining a lot of extra weight. I wasn't, the biggest kid, but I was definitely buying the husky sized pair of pants. I think the best way to describe it was I wasn't the dead last pick on the kickball team, but, I was probably the second or third to last and buddies with the guy in last place. And, fast forward through that, I just got a little bit more active, was riding my bike around a lot to friends' houses, picked up some sports like surfing, playing, basketball in the mornings and in the afternoons. And that led to me losing weight and really, going from what they used to call me to the Pillsbury Doughboy to somebody who was just moderately active. The biggest, turning point for me that actually got me into fitness was I had a friend in high school who convinced me for whatever reason I should join the high school lacrosse team. I'd never played lacrosse. The last time I played an organized sport was my participation trophy in elementary school. So, I said, okay, what the heck, I'll go for it. He's like, nobody really knows how to play. It's fine. So everybody makes the team and went through a couple different coaches. And I had this Coach Fusselman. He was, one of the teachers at the school. And the best way to describe him is somebody who was on the varsity team for 8 sports, but I'm pretty sure he only maybe started or played on 1 or 2 of them. Mm-hmm. So just a great guy, super involved. And he actually put a lot of investment into us, started bringing us into the weight room, went into some structured practices. And up until that point, I'd always kind of had the idea of I like to exercise, pick up dumbbells and do a few curls before like the homecoming dance. Signed up for the 9th grade weightlifting class and liked it, but just never stuck with it. Mm-hmm. And finally, we were in there and I had a real reason to train. I wanted to be good at lacrosse. We had a lot of guys who were basically skipping football conditioning and going on the lacrosse team instead because they felt like it was easier. So if you can imagine all of a sudden not playing organized sports for a long time and then you're lined up against, the starting linebacker of your football team, you have some pretty good motivation to exercise, to get in shape and get stronger. Mm-hmm. And the real turning point was at the end of my season. He pulled me aside for 20 seconds and he just told me, hey, if you keep up the physical regimen you're on, there's no reason you're not a starter next year. So at that point, I was, running out of school, having a pre-workout in my last class of the day, run across the street, go work out, come back to lacrosse practice, and I was loving exercising. And from that point on, I was just so dedicated. I was practiced the whole off season. I was working at CVS at the time. I would close up the store, and so I would bring all the fitness magazines from the back of the store up to the front and read whenever there weren't any customers there. I even, it's kind of ridiculous looking back at it, but my Arnold's Modern Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding, that 600-page book, I actually used to take that with me to my shifts as a cashier and have a notebook and take notes on it and followed all those
Nice.
programs. So I fell in love with fitness and training, and I obviously made a lot of physical transformations. I was able to become the starter the next year and accomplish a lot of those goals. But I think what it did for me was really show me that, hey, when you put your mind to something, you can make changes, you can achieve things. And I think that goes well beyond just exercise. But I think, for maybe the first time in my life, I was like, well, I'm in control of my success here. If I put in the work, if I eat the right way, if I exercise the right way, I'm going to have success. I'm going to have results. And so on top of just changing myself physically, I just fell in love with the idea that I was now in control of it. And that's really what finally got me the fitness bug.
I dig it. I dig it. And what really is, I feel like a commonality within the fitness industry, most likely guys, is their story with Arnold. Everybody has an Arnold story. I feel like I remember my senior year of high school, I actually did, we had to do a biography on somebody, and I did mine on Arnold. And I remember writing up the paper. I remember the book. I think I still have the book. And even I think my first training booklet was a Weeder booklet. And
Mm-hmm.
of course, Arnold is mentioned there. And I feel everybody has their Arnold story. And I think it's an inspiration just seeing where he came from and then the motivation that he provides. And it's always great to hear everybody's story involving Arnold. But the second piece of that, which is I feel very attached to, is also I have a similar story, but there's a piece of research that I bring up from time to time. And it talks about providing the fundamental skill sets to adolescents, and within that, the benefits listed is the adherence to exercise in the future. So right there, in my opinion, you just explained exactly what and why exercise is important for adolescents in terms of learning these fundamental skill sets, these positive habits, and where they pay off in the future. You described exactly in terms of an issue that we have within our society with adolescents and overweight and obesity, and how you overcame those things through exercise and motivation. And those are the things that sometimes we can't measure. We can't measure the motivation. We can't measure those types of things within research sometimes. So it's hard to say, okay, if you stick to this program, your child is going to see all these benefits in the future. Sometimes they want to see a test score, an A plus, or a 90%. And sometimes we can't just go off of that. But you described right there exactly what I think we should invest more in my opinion. So it's
Mm-hmm.
great that you shared those items. So you're working at CVS, you're training for lacrosse. Where does the fitness injury in terms of your first position? Where does that start getting in there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So as I made this physical transformation and people started noticing, I came to the conclusion that I loved the process so much and I wanted to help other people do it. And I was actually going to University of Florida, following that senior year. So I decided, hey, I want to become a personal trainer. I want to do this. On top of that, I need a job. So I went to University of Florida, and they have a personal training program there where basically you sign up. It's not for credits. You have to pay to do it. But for, 8 to 10 weeks, essentially you just take an extra class and you're going in and doing practicals while you're going through your certification. So I applied and I interviewed to get into that program and was fortunate enough that, they took in this kid with long, shaggy hair into their personal training program. And, I was just so dedicated to it, already training there. And, I put a lot of work into wanting to be a good trainer. Of course, when you're personally invested in fitness too, you're loving everything you're learning because they're like, oh, I can go out into the gym and all of a sudden get better results. So I went through that, a pretty rigorous interview process where you have to train, multiple people while your future supervisor is basically over your shoulder, and they give you feedback and tell you, basically you need to do this before the next session. And, you need to do that if you want to get the job. So, I was fortunate to be successful in getting a job there. And during that same time, I got a job working in the fitness assessment center at the rec center. So, students could come in and I would do all sorts of assessments on them. We do motivational interviewing. We would do FMS. We would do all sorts of strength, posture, VO2 max tests, and basically get used to just assessing people and giving them an idea of what they need to do to be successful, what sort of risk areas that they might have, or if they're a higher level athlete, giving them a better idea of the program they want to go in. So, working in there combined with being a trainer and getting some clients, that's really where, I started to see what it was actually like to work in fitness.
Yeah, yeah. I've a couple buddies that have actually done similar paths, and I've actually heard great things about the University of Florida. One of my first fitness managers, he did the program out there, and also did his master's at the University of Florida. And all the people in terms of that I've come across that have done that program, solid individuals just like yourself. So it's great to hear that. I know that only select few of university feel have similar programs like that. I
Mm-hmm.
did my undergrad was at Cal State University Long Beach, and I know that we had a very, I'll say, unique program where my emphasis was in fitness. My main degree is kinesiology, but there's an emphasis in fitness, and we did similar things to get contact hours, working with different populations, and getting that experience, so that when you do go out into the world, the fitness industry, you hopefully have that leg up that some people they might not get with, in terms of if they're just doing a exercise science degree and
Mm-hmm.
essentially they graduate. Okay, where do I go from now? And they don't have that experience. So very awesome stuff with that. So going through college, got the degree, got some great experience. When was Youfit your first position out of college?
It wasn't. So I had a extended stay in college. I ended up working through the campus rec route and basically became an assistant manager for the personal training department and managing the revenue, the budget, the hiring,
Nice.
the development of the trainers. Having the opportunity to then actually go in and teach the parts of the personal training prep course through PTA Global,
Mm-hmm.
um, and work through that. Then, I was a little bit out of a loss of what I wanted to do. I knew that I loved fitness. I wasn't sure where I wanted to live, what exactly I wanted to do, what the opportunities were. And at that point, I'd also started teaching group fitness, and the opportunity came up to interview again at University of Florida and some other schools to be a graduate assistant, where it's one of the best deals I think you can ever get in education. Essentially you get paid to go to school and they pay 98% of your tuition in
Mm-hmm.
exchange for working. So I interviewed for that and I actually took a step from personal training, still, kept clients, but then moved into oversight of the group fitness program where, I think we had about 160 classes a week at a few different spots and really got more immersed into the group fitness scene and co-taught the ACE group fitness instructor course that we had there, got into teaching a lot of different formats like stadium conditioning, cycle, strength, cardio. The way I describe it is really everything but dance and kickboxing. So if you can get away with not having a 32 count and not dancing, I was teaching those classes.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a great experience. And then I took an absolute leap of faith, and my first job after that, before Youfit, was with Club Med. So for those who don't know, Club Med was the first original all-inclusive resort. Back in the 50s and the 60s in Europe, the days of sandals and all that didn't used to exist. So Club Med was the first all-inclusive where it's a really unique setting. Essentially, guests are friends with everybody who works there. So instead of basically in some situations maybe avoiding workers, you actually dine with everybody who's working there. You're immersed in activities. There's so many physical activities. So a lot of people come over from Europe and they're not looking to lay on a beach all day. They want to work out. They want to do archery. They want to take their tennis lesson. They want to go play basketball. They want to do water aerobics in the pool. And, I took this leap of faith and moved to the Dominican Republic and started up a fitness center there. So Club Med had just been bought out by a Chinese investment firm. So they were reinvesting into it. And the location in the Dominican Republic was their flagship where they would try out all the new concepts. So I was brought in there and I showed up and there's basically no gym even built yet. So when we walk in, we're like, okay, well, I don't see this gym being done in 2 weeks, but construction in other countries is a little different. And yeah, the paint basically dried an hour before the gym opened there. And, I went in, I just totally built out their concept. So we did small group training where we had a class that was basically like your standard boot camp, CrossFit without the technical exercises. We had, a class that was running, rowing, and strength. We also taught cycle and then personal training, nutrition counseling, taking people through the buffet and educating them on how to eat healthy while they were there. So that was my next big experience, which was an awesome experience because we had people from all over the world. And at one point, I was teaching a class in English, Spanish, and French all at the same time, which was super challenging, but fun. And, it got to the point where I was working 6 days a week, training, 30 plus small group classes, plus clients, plus all of the other, activities that go into an all-inclusive resort where you have to dance in shows, you're constantly entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
So it was an amazing experience, incredibly hard work. I don't even know how many hours a week I worked, but super fun. The ongoing joke there is that you fall asleep before your head hits the pillow, which is, I can definitely attest to. I don't ever remember trying to fall asleep there in all the months I was there. But ultimately, physically, mentally, it just wasn't really the right fit for me. I was getting a little bit burnt out from just the insane amount of work.
I bet.
And I was also in a long distance relationship with my now fiance who was in Florida, and the Wi-Fi is just absolutely terrible where I was working. So that didn't help. So ultimately I decided that it was an amazing experience that I learned a lot from, but it wasn't the long-term fit for me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I decided to move back to Florida and take on the next step, which was Youfit.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, you see those positions when potentially going on vacation, and sometimes you wonder. I know that the last time I was actually in the Dominican, it was last year, and I struck up a conversation with the individual working there, his background and whatnot. And I mean, those facilities are beautiful down there. And I mean, with yours, I mean, being a part of that process, I'm sure was a great learning experience. And I mean, I can only imagine the skill sets that you developed while being there and doing all those different things. And I got to make sure that I comment on what you mentioned about the 32 count. And same exact experience when in my undergrad, we had to do fundamentals or advanced techniques of group exercise. And at the end, we had to basically teach a group exercise class. Don't get me wrong. I can do, step or from the other side, and I think they're fun. I'll say that, even though I power lift, Olympic lift, and do other things like that. Doing a step class, it's fun. It's messing around, having a good time. It's good exercise. But teaching it, I have a new level of respect. Ever since that, a new level of respect for instructors that can teach choreography like that and keep that count in their head, cue people at the same time. It's just a skill set that I personally don't have, but have a lot of respect for those instructors. So, yeah, you came back from Florida. How did Youfit come up on your radar? And was your first position just personal trainer, or was it manager level?
So I came back and I was just assessing. I think something important for really everybody in fitness is looking at, there are so many career paths in fitness. It's insane the amount of different careers that somebody can have, the amount of different paths they have. So what I did was I looked at, what did I love doing the most within fitness? And I realized that education was something I really had a passion for. Even, when I first started out and being mentored, teaching those classes to certify trainers, to certify instructors, doing the onboarding for new people. That's really where a lot of my passion was. And that led me finding a position at Youfit, based in Fort Lauderdale, where essentially we had contractors within the gym before that ran personal training. It's kind of a common play in some places. So it was basically literally another company inside of the gym. And Youfit made the decision to bring personal training in-house and make it part of Youfit. And so at that point, we were establishing it, and a big component that was needed was making sure that the personal training we're offering is good quality, making sure that we have a career pathway for the trainers, making sure they understand, I'm joining Youfit, where am I starting now? Where can I go? And what skills do I need? So I was brought in essentially because of the background with PTA Global certification, where they were using that as a primary certification. We also built out levels that they could move up based on, sessions, sales, education. So I really came in to build that structure around education and upskill the personal trainers.
And I mean, I know that just from speaking with you prior to this, and then my experiences with Ron Merriman, that Youfit is a company that really does appreciate the education. I know that you and Ron are individuals that know what it can do for a personal trainer's career, and what it can do for a business that does appreciate it. So it's always good to hear what you guys are working on and your guys' direction, your strategic direction with it. So it's a good almost segue now to kind of get your feedback, and with your position now as the senior director of fitness and different levels in terms of where you've worked in the past, kind of what are your general thoughts on the fitness industry with accreditation and licensure, and kind of what you've seen working with a large chain?
Mm-hmm. Now, I think anything somebody will notice is that there is so much difference in the personal training certifications that are out there
Mm-hmm.
that every certification is almost like it really is a different brand. It's a different take on what fitness is, what's important in fitness, what's important for your clients. Now, I think that's great because personal trainers need to have their own personality. And I think it helps them sort of figure out, what client base they're going to work best with.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the flip side of it is it's very confusing for an employer sometimes to have to work through, okay, we have 20 different certifications. What's the standard of this certification? What's the accreditation? And essentially, where can we draw the line of standards with all these certifications? Because they do teach a lot of the same thing, but it's essentially always just rebranded into something different
Mm-hmm.
takes on it. Like, for example, PTA Global is going to be a lot about behavior change, individualizing to the client. Whereas again, ASM might be really about corrective exercise.
Mm-hmm.
So, how do we get a good blend of it with our trainers? I think that licensure would make the process and the CEUs and the renewals a lot easier for it. Now, I could see that potentially increasing the barriers to entry by increasing the cost of what a certification can be, because you can get an accredited certification for, $200, but if there's a licensure and it's controlled through the government, I'm sure it's going to be more expensive.
Mm-hmm.
So, I kind of see it twofold in that I think the barrier to entry in fitness is sometimes too easy. So, you get flooded with a lot of people who may not be as serious about it, or they think, oh, I'm going to make my own schedule, I can charge a lot, and I'm going to be a successful personal trainer, when we know it takes a lot more than that to succeed.
Yep.
Now, with the licensure, I think you just get people who are more serious about it and more committed. So, while there might be less people going into the industry, I think people would ultimately be more committed and would stay in the industry longer. And the longer somebody's in the industry, the more impact they're able to make on their clients, the longer lasting relationships they have with those clients, and the more stability there is. So, I do see the pro of the licensure, but I know that increased cost would be a barrier to a lot of people who are amazing trainers who might just not be in a position to spend that much money in going through the licensure.
Yeah, you point out a lot of good things there. And I know that that's actually a question that I've asked on this Fitness Fest podcast, and then the podcast that I run with Kips about licensure, depending upon who the guest is. And I remember I asked two different individuals who are within education at the university level about accreditation, licensure. And one of the good points that an individual brought up was that licensure could hopefully bring a point where insurance will pay for personal training. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that is something that I think we all can agree is it's an issue that we have. Why can't we see more of that?
Mm-hmm.
We are at a state where the country has such a high rate of overweight and obesity, and how can we tackle that? And if that does then spread down to the education and the standards to make it a career that is, I'll say, harder to access. Okay, I could see some benefits there. And this is coming from someone. I run a education company. I've worked for two different education
Mhm.
companies. And so I see the business side of it. I see the flip side of it with personal trainers. I see the gym side of it. And then you got to, of course, bring in the client aspect of it. And it's such a big thing to unpack and talk about because there's so many levels for it. And I think one of the main things that we can agree upon is um, that the lifespan of trainers is often not that long. So then what can we look at from the education level that changes it? What kind of tools can we give them to hopefully make them stay in the industry longer? And so I know that probably you would agree, and I've seen it firsthand, and you've probably ran across individuals. They didn't come from a, a exercise science degree. They didn't come from a full, kinesiology program from a university, but they're solid trainers. They invest
Mhm.
money in more certifications. They invest their time in getting experience, hands-on experience. So those things, they add up to a great trainer. And if they're working at a facility, I've seen this firsthand, they're racking in sales, they're pumping out clients, and it's a individual that a business would want to have on staff. So there's so
Mhm.
many questions to ask that it's not just as simple as, yep, let's snap our fingers. Licensure is in place. There's just so many different levels. And especially with thinking about people that are already in the industry, do they just get grandfathered in? So
Mhm.
I like asking that question just because depending upon where the individual in terms of their experience and then their
Mhm.
current position, they have different a unique perspective on it, but there's always that shared, okay, what about everybody feeling? Because I think that's one of the things that we see within the
Yeah.
industry is people care about others. So how are we going to improve
Mhm.
upon it?
Right. And I think the insurance part is, I feel like that's been the topic of conversation ever since I even started in fitness was, wouldn't it
Yeah.
be amazing if we could charge insurance for it? And I think, when you look at obesity and you look at all these chronic diseases, it's a diagnosable disease. And we know that the best treatment is a lifestyle change with exercise and nutrition and all those other management. So if we could do that, now I think that would also make it more lucrative because there's more clients. But if you're billing insurance, I'm sure that you'd be able to charge really good rates for those personal training sessions.
Mm-hmm. Good.
While I was at University of Florida, one of the programs we had was called Changes. It was essentially the there was a health council on campus, and they would basically give people scholarships to be part of this personal training program if they were obese. An 8-10 week program where they could come in and work with a trainer for free to help fight obesity. So I think there's a
Wow.
lot of things to be said for that, and licensure would definitely be a lucrative way to get there, and hopefully a way that would inspire more people to take up personal training. And at the same time, I think there's a lot of things as an industry that we could definitely do better in that realm too.
Yeah, yeah. So, kind of a unique question to ask you right now. With the education of it, you have an extensive educational background, and then what you just mentioned there, with different organizations having a different viewpoint on what are the necessities for an entry level trainer. So, when I started crafting the chapters and even we'll call it a theme for the personal trainer program that we put out with your kips. It was actually an idea that I got from somebody I mentioned, Ron Merriman,
Mm-hmm.
about it being, we're talking about the necessities of a personal trainer. So we actually focused on the, I'll say, the interpersonal skills. So
Mm-hmm.
how can someone talk with somebody within that first interaction with them? So that 1 hour consultation for them. So a lot of the flow of that program is directed upon the 1 hour assessment, interpersonal skills, and hopefully how can they get them to sign up as a client, because as you and I know, sometimes all they have is that one opportunity with them. And does and is exercise science, knowing biomechanics, knowing advanced anatomy, are all those things important? Of course they are. But is an entry level trainer going to be able to memorize those things and be an expert on them from one certification course, an entry level course? No, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just like you. I have a big educational background, and I'll say that's not going to help them right off the bat. Assessing them, being able to talk with them, being able to create a bond with them. Those are things that are important. And in my opinion, so the question to you is, when from your position with YouthFit, with your educational background, what are those things that you feel are important for a personal trainer, an entry level personal trainer?
Hmm. Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I think, starting off with essentially the college level anatomy, physiology, biology is just, it takes a while for you to understand how that actually plays a role and what happens with the clients, and to be able
Yeah.
to assess and actually use that information. But, when you teach a brand new trainer, hey, here's this muscle in your neck, like, they have no clue what to do with that information. And it takes a long time to get to that point.
Hmm.
Uh, I think the good part about a lot of education is that there's tools there that
Hmm.
they integrate all this science into a tool. So if you just know how to use the different tools, like an overhead squat assessment, well, you can fix the majority of a corrective exercise, or injuries or compensations that somebody might have, just based on knowing that. And over
Hmm.
time, you start doing it long enough and you start to understand, okay, they're telling me to stretch this muscle because when I'm looking at the body, it's moving this way. And then you start to be able to integrate the anatomy and the kinesiology and understanding, okay, that this is this type of joint and that's why this is happening. So I think it takes a while, but the most beneficial thing is just tools that shorten that. To me, to be a successful personal trainer, it's not necessarily reliant on your technical exercise science knowledge so much as it is your ability to build a relationship with that client, to
Hmm.
get them to be honest with you, to work on lifestyle management outside of the gym. Any new client, as long as they start exercising, they're going to see some kind of results. Over time, the program needs to get better and better, but going from nothing to something is always going to produce a result. So the challenge is really, how do you keep them doing something? So how do you keep a client motivated? And I think that comes from the interpersonal skills and understanding, okay, this person says they want to accomplish this, say they have a weight loss goal and, they want to lose it by their anniversary. That doesn't really tap into what's going to keep that person exercising for their whole life. It's the why behind all that, the motivation, what's happened in their life, what's important to them in their life. And being able to tap into that is really how you get somebody motivated.
Hmm.
So being able to motivate your client, understand where they are, be empathetic with them, I think is probably the biggest thing. I kind of have an ongoing joke and story that I tell all of our new personal trainers, and I feel like there's three kind of trainers out there that get started. I call them, the smile factory. It's that person who's super charismatic. If you were to look at the exercise program or maybe how they're cueing an exercise, it might not be by the book, the best programs out there, or the most technically correct, but they have such good charisma and they're able to build a relationship with somebody that people just enjoy spending time with them. And because of that, they keep training longer. Then I think there's also the trainer who I like to call, like, the academic, who, they got a certification, maybe they have a degree, very well versed on anatomy, physiology, energy system development, corrective exercise, all that. But they're very challenged at relating to clients, talking to them on a personal level. It's kind of like a prescriptive solution without any sort of personalization. And I see the need for those interpersonal relationships to be very strong in that case, because you might have the best program, but if you can't motivate somebody to do it, well, it doesn't matter how good the program is if nobody uses it.
Hmm.
And then, I think the other typical one we see is, like I call them the poncho, because, if it's raining and you go to a stadium, you're not going to be buying a small, medium, large poncho. You're getting the same poncho no matter, whether you're like 3 feet tall or 8 feet tall. And so we see that trainer who comes in and basically just does the exact same thing with every client, or does the same program as themselves. So, I think the skills that they need are really based off of those three things. Those are the three types of trainers I really see enter the industry. And I think in all those scenarios, it's really just about knowing the client better, building a relationship with them, and understanding, what do they want to accomplish. And then from some objective assessments, like an overhead squat, like some strength tests, some cardio tests, okay, what do they actually need to be successful physically and to make these changes, and just being able to blend those two things together, the needs and the wants of the client.
Oh yeah, Good stuff right there. I mean, sometimes we forget as personal trainers or even as individuals that we only see these people for 1, 2, 3 hours a week, unless you got some
Hmm.
client that's got the big bucks and you're potentially seeing them 4 or 5 times a week. But if not, you got 1 or 2 hours with them. So what are they doing for those other hours of the week? So
Hmm.
creating those types of lifestyle changes can be so beneficial, because if you can get your client to do some type of cardiovascular exercise outside without you even
Hmm.
there, what a big step that is. They're making that change. They're making those positive habits, and it makes your job easier as a personal trainer. So those interpersonal skills and those things that you learn with educations in different realms, I mean, they're huge. I mean, just within, if I do a quick little jog of my memory here, I feel like it was about 8 years ago. I was working for a company, an educational company, and we actually entered in an exercise psychology chapter into the personal trainer program, because based
Hmm.
off the needs assessment, we saw that this was such a big thing that we were missing. So we entered that chapter, and you look at entry level trainers or even working with clients, how important that is, understanding why. Because I think sometimes from our end as being personal trainers is that we can't empathize with them enough, empathize with them at all, just because we don't understand, like, why don't you like to exercise? I
Hmm.
love to exercise, and it's sometimes such a hard challenge for
Yeah.
that client. So those types of skills can only be sharpened more, worked on more. And I think that you would agree as well that oftentimes personal trainers, they're the therapists too. They
Hmm.
got to stand there, listen. I've told when I used to run a boot camp company, I had interns, and I would tell them that education is great. Of course I believe in it. I I'm pursuing more education, but that's maybe 30% of your job. There's 70% where you got to work with them. You got to listen to them because they want
Hmm.
to tell you, and you got to listen. And it's not about you; it's about them. It's about the client.
Yeah.
So really good points there, and I liked the different types of trainers, because in my head I was picturing all those different types of trainers and I'll say people that I've come across when I was a personal trainer.
Yeah. It definitely makes up the majority, but the simplest way to put it too is just saying personal training is personal. It's about that person. It's about your
Yeah,
relationship with them. But yeah, I mean, it's a people business, so it's ultimately about that person sitting across from you. And people are complicated.
yeah,
You can say that. And if you're getting into the training industry, if you've been a trainer, I think everybody's had that moment of like, wow, I can't believe this person's telling me this about their personal life. So
yeah.
definitely be prepared for those stories and head scratchers at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly. So going back to, how you got to this position where you are with UFIT, did you have any mentors that helped you along the way?
Definitely. I've been pretty fortunate to just have, my direct supervisor be good mentors in a lot of different roles. I think from, University of Florida, my first real mentor was probably Darcy Burdett, who was a faculty on PTA Global. And I think now she's, director of health and wellness for rec sports at UF. And I had another great one there, Leah. I had, going out into Dominican, a totally different scenario. I had a project manager that was over in North America, this guy, David Mayer, who was, not a fitness guy by any means, but, just well versed in the corporate world and understanding and how to work with people and, working in that scenario where you're with a lot of different cultures and personalities, just how to navigate those scenarios. And then at Youfit, like you mentioned, Ron Merriman has definitely been a mentor to me. He was actually, I remember still being interviewed by him, 4 years ago. He does a tough interview, but super, super knowledgeable, very, well versed in the business side of things as well as the education side. So he's been great. I had another, couple of supervisors at UFIT, Stu, our executive director of human resources, my former supervisor over learning and development, Nazmina, they were all amazing. I think the commonality between all those great mentors is belief in me and my ability.
Hmm.
And, at times more belief in me than I had in myself. I think that's a huge part of the mentorship is just that belief and that trust that you can instill in someone. And then also None of them are easy on me. They all challenge me. I challenge myself quite a bit already, but they definitely challenged me and let me make mistakes that still bug me to this day. But because of that, I've never made that same mistake again. So I've definitely had a lot of mentors, and I think anybody in fitness absolutely needs a mentor. It's important to stay humble. It's always important to understand how you can get better. I was fortunate. One of the tools that I first learned was the Kaizen 6, which in Japanese is continuous improvement. So doing that with a client all the time, asking, hey, what are you enjoying about this training experience? What can I do better? Questions like that ultimately instilled that into my mindset, and was something that a lot of my mentors throughout the time did. And, here's where you're doing well. And, being just very honest and open and not offensive in any way, but hey, here's how you can improve. And I think seeking out that feedback and getting that feedback from a mentor is really one of the most effective things you can do to be successful in the industry. Be open to that feedback and seek that feedback out, because you can always get better. So you need somebody who's going to challenge that, but you have to learn to challenge yourself to do that when nobody's looking to.
Oh yeah. 100% agree. And I like that you mentioned the individual while you were in the Dominican that wasn't necessarily a fitness person, because actually in the last couple of years, some of my mentors have been outside of the fitness industry, just business individuals, high-level executives, and they're just people that they understand business, they understand the interpersonal skills of business, and there's great resources, even though we're in separate industries. Sometimes it just comes down to a business deal. And how can you approach this? What is the strategy of it? Those types of things. And so finding somebody, I know that when we enter the industry, it's always great to have somebody that's in the industry, because they've had those experiences, they've had those early morning shifts, they've had those late night shifts of training. But at some point, I wouldn't say don't stray away from finding somebody and talking with individuals outside the industry, because there's such great resources, and they can help your mindset in a different way. So great point right there. So as we're starting to kind of wind this down, kind of wrap up this podcast, where can listeners and viewers find you online? Or I know that right now, at the time we're recording this, it's a time when we're not really going to be having any live conferences coming up, but where can people find you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If they want to find out more about, Youfit and the company I'm at now, it's youfit.com, youfit.com. And for me personally, I'm on LinkedIn as Raphael Konforti, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, even TikTok. It's just at Raphael Konforti, just first name, last name, Raphael Konforti.
Perfect. Raph, thank you for coming on, sharing your story. This podcast is really about sharing how people, where they start, those things that they encounter through their journey, and where they are now, and those steps between there. So it's really great that you shared those details, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.